And look who's coming up.
Hello there. Welcome to Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily on this Wednesday, September 7th. So much going on just at this moment. You've got a terrific U.S. Open match. They're into the quarterfinals. You got some afternoon baseball happening right now. Twins and Yankees. The Yankees getting beat right now by a guy making his first ever start. Tomorrow is the beginning of the National Football League season. I mean, who isn't excited about that? How can you not get excited about the NFL season getting underway tomorrow? That's going to be just awesome. Simply awesome. All right, welcome into the Marsh, just outside of Edmonton. My name is Dean Millard with Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. Check out the website, UFFsports.com. Lots to see, including our logo challenge, which is going on right now. Really excited about today's show. We are just waiting to hopefully bring on our first guest because he is a busy man. But Matt Bove of WKBW in Buffalo, covering the Bills, who open the season tomorrow against the Rams. Also, Larry Fisher, Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports, head of hockey, massively into scouting on the platform as well. So we'll tell you a little bit about, how you can get involved, the cool things about it. But also, we're going to touch on a couple of signings in the NHL for some young players. One, an RFA in Kirby Dach in Montreal, and Tim Stützle signing an extension next year. Also, Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva. Should we be taking this seriously? Larry's big into the fight game. He'll tell us if Jake Paul is for real or if not, and he won't sugarcoat it at all. Chicago Blackhawks. We're not going to sugarcoat that. We're going to take a look at the Dobber Hockey preview. We should almost do one now and one when we think all the trades are going to be made. And fill in the blank. A little bit later on in the program, we will definitely have some fun with that one, when it comes to fantasy and other things as well. Plus, of course, our top three, our question of the day, and what games to watch. And there's some awesome games on right now in the afternoon, so I'm sure we'll find some fun ones to take a look at later on this evening. All right, as we wait for our guests to sign in, we might as well get to our question of the day. And we can always watch, I'll be watching the back channel to see if Matt Bove signs in. But what one player will impact your fantasy football season the most? Is there one guy out there? Is it one position? Is it your quarterback? Is it your running back? Is it is it your receiver? Is there a receiver? Like Mike Evans is on my fantasy team, the defending champion Brandon 8-Ball. He might be the impact player for me, depending on what him and Tom Brady get going. Could have a severe impact. There's other candidates, obviously. But that's the one guy that stands out as, putting up a ton of touchdowns. Javonte Williams in Denver. A lot of people are going to be relying on him. And I have Tyreek Hill as well. I don't expect the same output from Tyreek Hill. So we'll see. I'll go with Mike Evans for this question. Jalen Hurts is my quarterback, and I'm not worried about him, but I don't think He's going to be among the leaders, whereas Mike Evans can be. And I'm in a touchdown-only league, so that's why I'm going with Mike Evans. But would love to hear your thoughts on that. One player that could have a massive impact in your fantasy football team. Everybody joining us in our Twitch message board, thank you so much for being here today. Chime in and tell me where you're watching from. And let me know about your fantasy football, the one player that will have an impact on your fantasy football team the most this season. Like I said, for me, I'm going with Mike Evans. And you know what? I used to be in like 3 football, 3 hockey. I've slimmed down. For one, I'm so busy with Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports and my one hockey active team, in the team that's active in the league. Our AHL will be launched this year. But I'm only in 1 football league. I'm only in 1 baseball league. I'm only in 1 hockey league. I'm concentrating. And I've been waiting lately, so I'm trying to, be a professional. And that's what Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports is. Professional fantasy sports. Mirroring what the actual leagues go with as well. So chime in on Twitch or on Twitter at Duck Millard, at UFS Network, if you want to touch base with me during the show. And the question of the day, once again, is what one player will impact your fantasy football season the most? All right, let's keep rolling with our top 3 as we wait for our guest, Matt Bove in Buffalo, to sign on. Top 3 today, bounce back players. Now, every year, this could be a variety of names. There's a couple of names because they have been hurt that I think they're going to make this an interesting one. Christian McCaffrey, number 1 on my list. I mean, this guy has missed 23 games over the last 2 years due to a permanent residence in the MASH unit. He's just 26 years old. He's dealt with ankle, shoulder, hamstring injuries. I mean, he kind of reminds me of the Knight in Monty Python. It's only a flesh wound. Still going. But yet, he was a fantasy beast. 2019, the number 1 running back in all scoring formats. He had over almost 1,400 rushing yards and over 1,000 receiving yards. He absolutely crushed the competition. It was no contest. 123 more points in half PPR leagues than the guy who was number 2, and that was Aaron Jones. The only player to score more points in fantasy that year was Lamar Jackson. And this year, I think we're going to see him back on top. All right, I am just going to get the shot set up for our next guest here. I'm really excited about Matt Bove joining us. So give me 1 second as I get this aligned. And we will be talking about the Buffalo Bills. I mean, is there a team that is more hyped right now? I don't think so. And certainly for good reason, for sure. All right. Let's, first of all, turn on his mic and bring in our guest. Matt Bove is joining us. Matt is the sports director at WKBW in Buffalo. Thank you so much, Matt. I know it's a crazy busy time for you, so you just let me know when you need to get out. But so much hype outside of Buffalo right now. I cannot imagine what the hype is in Buffalo when it comes to guys like Josh Allen, whether it's fantasy or the real world. I mean, everybody's talking about Buffalo right now, outside of the fantasy, outside of Buffalo. What's it like in the city?
Well, it's insane. everybody has the highest expectations that there has ever been in my lifetime surrounding this team, and rightfully so. They're so good. They're expected to contend for a Super Bowl. It's really Super Bowl or bust this year, and I think that's what has so many people going into the season excited, but also terrified, because with expectations like this, we've never kind of seen it like that before. So people are like, okay, Super Bowl or bust, and it almost feels like anything short of that would be a massive disappointment. So I think they're going to have an outstanding season. I think they're really, really strong. But I think more importantly, for the sake of the conversation here, they have tons of fantasy relevant players, which is awesome, especially if you're somebody who plays fantasy football.
Yeah, I mean, this really is a fantasy football dream team when you look at the depth. And the thing I find interesting, you look at last year, the top two quarterback wide receiver stacks, they're gone. I mean, Rodgers, Adams, gone. Mahomes, Hill, gone. That was, statistically going into it. It's Allen, Diggs as number one. How good do you think they can be? And you mentioned it. How hard is it going to be to live up to all these expectations that people have for this duo?
I think as far as the fantasy stacks are concerned, I actually like the Josh Allen, Gabe Davis stack far more than I like the Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stack. If you're going to do that, just because Diggs costs you such a premium in draft, if you're playing daily fantasy, he's such an expensive option. I am all in on the Gabe Davis hype train right now. I think he is going to have an outstanding season, and I think for the value, even though he is a really hot commodity in leagues, he is going to be worth it. His target share is going to go up. It's just the way that it is with Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley leaving. There's something like 160 targets that need to be accounted for, and I think a lot of those are going to go to him. So I love that stack. I still really like Stephon Diggs. Like, if you're not going to have the stack there and you can only have one of the people, Stephon Diggs might ultimately be the most valuable. But if you're looking to try and have multiple, I'm all in on Gabe Davis, especially if you can stack him with Josh Allen.
That's a really, really great point, because the coverage inevitably is going to be weaker. It's like Allen Robinson he's got Cooper Kupp on the other side, so everybody's loading up on Allen Robinson. So that's a really, really good point. Dawson Knox signs a 4-year extension worth more than $53 million. This is a guy that fantasy football fans know had a massive amount of touchdowns last year, but not as many targets as some of the tight ends. He was up there in touchdown totals. Does that change this year, and does he assert himself as, a top 5 tight end this year?
I don't think from fantasy standards he will become a top 5 tight end, just because I do think the targets are going to go up, but I think the touchdown production is going to go down a little bit. So I think that ultimately you're going to kind of see some similar numbers, which are still fantasy relevant, but not anything like the likes of Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Darren Waller, those kind of guys. So I think that if you're somebody who wants to wait on a tight end, or if you're playing daily and you don't want to spend a premium for a tight end, he's a really strong matchup play depending on who the Bills are playing. Josh Allen loves him in the red zone, though. So that's why he has that boomer bust potential, because there's going to be games when he probably brings in 4 catches, but 2 of them are touchdowns. And if you do that and you're playing them, then you could win yourself a week, or you could win yourselves a lot of money. So I think that Dawson Knox is a really strong player. I think his contract today, kind of a no-brainer for the Bills. They want him to be part of this team for a long, long time, but that's more of like the real football side of things than specifically the fantasy football side of things.
It's not often we talk about a football team in fantasy perspective and get this far in the conversation before we talk about the running game. But, we've talked about Josh Allen, which is a big part of the running game. What should fantasy fans expect out of this running game? Could it be frustrating for them this year?
I wouldn't really probably buy stock in any of them. I think Singletary will be your traditional starting running back. But as we kind of saw last year, they're totally fine riding the hot hand, whether that be Singletary, whether that be Zach Moss. A lot of people didn't know Zach Moss was going to make the team. I think he's going to be like a role player on the team. I think he's going to probably get more carries than people expect. And then James Cook, there's so many questions about him. James Cook, if you're in like a dynasty league, or if you're somebody who can keep a player, I like him as a late round flyer, just because Singletary's contract's up after this year. The Bills don't have the resources or the money to pay a running back a premium amount. So they'll probably let him walk, and then Cook will ultimately become kind of the feature back. So I think if you're in it for like the long haul, I would want Cook of the 3 of them. But as far as this year is concerned, like, I don't think they're going to be consistently startable, any of them. I think if they've got a really good matchup, or maybe if one of them goes down, that changes a little bit. But with all three of them likely getting playing time, it makes it a little bit trickier.
Defensively, for people in IDP leagues or looking at a defense and special teams to take, who stands out from your eye on the Bills?
Well, it's hard not to love Von Miller, but I think that if you kind of go a little bit deeper and take a little bit of a deeper dive, I think Ed Oliver is just an absolute freak of nature, and I think Von Miller is going to kind of unlock him to the point we haven't seen him. Ed Oliver has been a really good player in the NFL and a really, really well-respected player, but his numbers don't make him one of the elite guys. I think this year, being next to Von Miller, his numbers could take a massive spike. He's an undersized defensive tackle, so everybody immediately compares him to Aaron Donald, and that's ludicrous. You can't do that. But there are some similarities to the way that they play, and Aaron Donald had a lot of success playing next to Von Miller. So if Ed Oliver can have half of the success, I bet the Bills will be pretty happy.
Matt, thank you so much. I know this is a really busy time for you, so thanks for squeezing in some time. Enjoy the ride. It's going to be amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me, and enjoy the NFL season.
All right, we for sure will. There's Matt Bove, host of It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Sounds like a really cool show. You can check out his Twitter handle. Once again, at Matt_Bove. That's Bove. A great rundown. And it's interesting. Like Dawson Knox last year in touchdowns only leagues was just as he was like a top 3 tight end. He had the same amount of touchdowns, but not the targets. I picked him up with like a 3rd round pick in a dynasty league. So I'm really excited to see, what the production he can do. And I love that comment that Matt made that, the overpayment for Diggs that has happened, that could happen, is something to watch. And when you look at that depth chart, Gabe Davis, what did Matt say? I'm all in on the Gabe Davis train. So if you have Diggs and you can somehow get Gabe Davis and something else and something for Diggs, you might be able to do that. That might be a smart trade to go after. Or if you somehow have a draft tonight, which would be awesome, the night before the season or tomorrow, maybe move Gabe Davis up a little bit and Stephon Diggs down. Quite interesting conversation. Larry Fisher, Super Bowl or bust, no pressure, Bills Mafia. Will be fun to watch for real. And Tony says Bills are going to be fun to watch this year. Don Ewing, hello. Hi, Don. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I think the Bills have been really fun. I mean, Jake Allen, he's a great quarterback. He's mobile. They have obviously excellent receivers. As Matt said, the running game isn't that great, so it's not really worth investing in. But, it's funny. Duke Johnson was a guy who I thought was going to stick there because of his out-of-the-backfield catch-patching ability, but he did not. All right, Matt Bove, WKBW in Buffalo. I feel like Howard Stern, that. WNBC, WKBW in Buffalo. That was a great conversation with Matt. We'll try to get him on another time. Big thanks to executive producer of our Twitch channel, Jamie Thomas, for lining up some of these awesome guests, and we're going to keep it going. Larry Fisher, later on in the show. Can't wait to talk a little hockey, a little fighting, and tell you how you can get involved in our scouting program. Also, tomorrow, Mike McKenna, former NHL goaltender, scheduled to join us. As well, on Friday, tentatively have lined up Mike Wilner, former Jays play-by-play man, to get into it. Jays lost, tough one last night. But yeah, we've got some fun guests lined up for the rest of this week. And Andy McNamara will join us every Thursday to set up the NFL Thursday Nighter, which you can watch on Twitch. This year, it's going to be so very, very cool. Oh, my good friend, Jack Cookson, sending me a Beat LA. That reminds me, afternoon baseball, Dodgers-Giants right now. Twins-Yankees, we'll get into all that as we go. All right, that was a really great conversation with Matt, and we're going to have another fun one with Larry Fisher. Andy Mack says Larry in the house today. Yeah, he's going to be not in studio. That'll be fun. The first time we get in studio. Larry and I have so much in common. It's like we're twins separated by a bunch of years because there's so many things that are weird that we have in common. It's freaky. So we're going to talk with him a little bit later. But when we come back after this short commercial break, we're going to touch on our top three, which we didn't get to finish. We'll dive back into our question of the day. Here's the question of the day as we go to break. We'll let you know. You can think about it while we're getting refreshments. What one player will impact your fantasy football season the most? For me, it's Mike Evans in my touchdown-only league because he's a touchdown monster. Dawson Knox could be that guy because I don't care about if he gets two targets and both of them are touchdowns. I love it. But I think Mike Evans is going to be among the touchdown leaders. I hope. I'm not confident about Tom Brady this year. I still think he can get Mike Evans to double digits, though. We'll see. What one player will impact your fantasy football season the most? Chime in, if you please, on Twitch or send me a message at Duck Millard at UFS Network. All right. Time for a quick, short break. We'll be back right away. And we'll get back into our top three as well as our question of the day and much more. This is Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily. We're back in a second. All right, this is Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily from the Marsh, just outside of Edmonton. My name is Dean Millard. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm so used to saying us because I've always had a producer or something. And this is all All the mistakes are mine, so I can't blame anybody for any of the mistakes that are made. So let's circle back to our question of the day that we threw out before we went to break. What one player will impact your fantasy football season the most? Who is it out there? Is it your running back? Is it your quarterback? Are you freaking out about your roster? Or do you like your roster? Chime in, if you will, on our message board on Twitch. Twitch.tv/Ultimate Fantasy Sports. You can also get me on Twitter at Duck Millard, and you can get us at UFS Network. All right, our top three today. We got to this a little earlier, and then we wanted to bring in Matt Bove because he was very, very busy. But bounce back candidates in the National Football League. And so Christian McCaffrey, like I said, I'll recap. This guy has missed 23 games in the last 2 years because he had a permanent residence in the MASH unit. Ankle, shoulder, hamstring. But before that, he was a beast. 2019, easily number one running back. Almost 1,400 yards, over 1,000 yards receiving. Crushed the competition. Had 123 more points in half PPR leagues than Aaron Jones, who was the number 2 running back. The only guy that year to score more is Lamar Jackson. McCaffrey is back, so I think that's the easy and obvious candidate, and if that's your choice, he should go number 1. I don't know if there's anybody that is going to have, if there is a bounce back, a bigger bounce back because of the amount of time that this guy has missed and because how great he is when he is healthy. And man, did I ever hit the jackpot. I had Christian McCaffrey in 2019, and then I was going to lose him, so I traded him for Alvin Kamara, who the other guy was going to lose, and ended up winning my league that year because Kamara went off in the 6-touchdown game. But anyway, McCaffrey, if you have been waiting for him, this is the year I think he crushes it again. I don't know if he's going to be as good as 2019. That's like all-world, legendary Hall of Fame season. But I definitely think a bounce back is in the works. Hopefully it's more like, I just don't want the guy to get rolling and then, week 8 he's limping or something. Now, Saquon Barkley of the Giants, the main reason he's here is the Giants' offensive line, instead of, being one of the worst of all time, just absolutely terrible.
It's some bull crap.
Exactly, Cleveland. They're a lot better. They were last going into last year. They've rose to 18th. Now, still not the greatest. Like, they're 18th.
Child, please.
But it's better. And Saquon Barkley just needs a good offensive line. He looked good times last year. 3 touchdowns in weeks 3 and 4. But then an ankle injury derailed it all. And Barkley was down. He's healthy, and he has a chip on his shoulder. He said this week, bleep everyone.
What are we? Werewolves, not swearwolves.
We don't swear on here, but he said bleep everyone. So he's been more vocal. He has the talent, the motivation now, it seems, to prove people wrong. It just needs the body to hold up. And if you took a chance on Saquon Barkley, I did a couple of years ago. Sucked, obviously. Hopefully this is the year. And you want to talk about bad seasons. Allen Robinson was horror awful last year. He was a wide receiver 10, 2 straight years with Chicago. And last year, what does he do? Throws up 1 touchdown.
Am I hot? Yeah, I'm hot. That's a crock of crap.
Less than 500 yards on 38 catches. Was it the QB? Has it always been the QB? We're going to find out this year. He signs with the Rams. Now he gets passes from Matt Stafford.
All right.
While Stafford's wearing a Super Bowl ring. And here's the other really good thing. He is going to be across from Cooper Kupp, meaning weaker coverage, and he's a high-end, in my opinion, wide receiver too. So there's my top 3 candidates for a bounce-back season. I love it. Mr. Utopia 1 says the beast of the UFAFL certainly hope Barkley has a big year. Thanks so much for chiming in, dropping in. I love it. Listen, like I said, I think Saquon Barkley just needs an average offensive line. And their offensive line is less than average. Motivated, healthy, not the worst offensive line in the world.
60% of the time, it works every time.
I think it's a go. I think it's a go for Saquon Barkley this year. And so, Mr. Utopia, you should be happy with that. I love it. Back to our question of the day. What is one player that will impact your fantasy football season the most? Well, I'm guessing Mr. Utopia is going to go with Saquon Barkley. But if you drafted Christian McCaffrey, then that's probably the guy based on my top 3 bounce backs. But you know what? You go back to what Matt Bove said, and you look at the Gabe Davis situation in Buffalo. And you know what? It makes sense. What happens with the top cornerbacks in football? They don't get thrown at all the time. And if Stephon Diggs and Cooper Kupp are drawing double teams most of the time or whatever it might be, your Gabe Davis and your Allen Robinsons are going to be like, hey, I'm over here. Give me the goods. I'm taking it to the house. So if you do have a draft tonight, maybe push those guys up. Robinson up. Don't go chasing after Diggs or Waterfalls or Cooper Kupp, maybe.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Now, if you really want to stack it up and go for the number 1, I'm not saying don't do it. Obviously, there's merit in that, and there's obviously a lot of talent in that, especially if Cooper Kupp does it again. But do you honestly think Cooper Kupp is going to be able to repeat that fantasy season last year was nuts?
Huge. That's huge. Huge.
So a guy like Allen Robinson might be the guy who wins you your fantasy league this year. It could happen. Less coverage, weaker coverage, decent amount of targets. There's no reason why those guys, and if Allen Robinson was a wide receiver, a top 10 guy before with Trubisky and whoever else was throwing him the ball, what's going to happen with him not being the focal point and a better quarterback? We'll see. Really good action today right now. Rublev and Tiafoe at the U.S. Open. Tiafoe's up 7-6, 7-6, and they're in the third set. It's a good one. That match last night with Nick Kyrgios was wild. He just kept yelling at his coaches. So 7-6, 7-6, and it's 4-3. So this looks like he's making his way to the semis. And, of course, as I mentioned, some afternoon baseball on the deck right now, or on the schedule right now. The Yankees, remember that Tommy boy? What's your favorite team? The Yankees. The Twins are leading 3-1 over the Yankees. The Yankees are losing to a guy who is making his major league debut. Now, that's not as bad as the Leafs losing to a Zamboni driver as a goalie, but it's still like, wow. It's impressive stuff. We'll tell you a little bit more. They just recently called up Varland, And he's impressive. 5 innings today. He's given up 1 hit and 1 earned run against the vaunted, normally amazingly scary Yankees lineup. Right now, it's basically Aaron Judge. No Rizzo. Donaldson's not even in the lineup today. Not surprising. So, also the Dodgers and the Padres, they are underway. Colorado smoking Milwaukee 7-0 so far. Oakland up 2-0 over Atlanta. The Angels and Detroit scoreless, and the White Sox and Seattle also scoreless. Twin bill today for the Yankees and Twins, and I think the Mets and maybe not. Maybe just the Yankees and Twins are playing a twin bill. So we'll keep you up to date on all of that stuff that is going on in the world of sports. But still to come on the program, we're going to get to some signings in the National Hockey League with a couple of young players, some NFL news regarding the New York Jets quarterback, guys for you to grab and stash. Give you some advice on guys that you might want to grab and pick up right now, and some baseball news. As mentioned, Anthony Rizzo not expected back, and actually has been placed on the injured list. So a lot of that stuff, a really funny video about cats and dogs on the 11th year anniversary of it, and a spectacular night for Chelsea Gray in the WNBA last night, as well as some top shelf fantasy performances. So we've still got a very, very busy show. Matt Bove joined us earlier. Larry Fisher is scheduled to join us in just a little bit. But right now, we're going to duck out for a short commercial break, grab a little glass of water, and while I'm gone, check out this amazing opportunity with the Ultimate Crypto Driving Championship.
Get yourselves ready to race at great heights to become the global sim racing champion. Create your crypto livery. Enter with the best designs. Enter to win prizes. Outrace your competition. Winning is all that matters. Watch the other racers in your rear view mirror. Gain massive exposure battling against the biggest names in crypto with a season-long race for the championship. Bring glory to your token. Drive like a champion, win it all. Be first or last. If you're not rubbing, you're not racing. Get behind the wheel and drive for your project.
All righty, let's keep rocking on with the show and give you the latest fantasy news and notes that you need to win your league. No idea why that's wouldn't stop. There we go. My name is Dean Millard. Thank you very much for joining me here in the Marsh, just outside of Edmonton, for Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily here on Twitch. If you missed any of our shows, you can always catch them in replay format. We upload them to YouTube, and we put them out in podcast format as well. Just search for Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, wherever you find your podcasts, or on YouTube, and you can get all that great information. I don't know why that's there, but all right, so if you want to check out more information about Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports, check out UFFsports.com. The VR1 racing is going to be amazing. We've got daily fantasy cards coming out. So much cool stuff, and the leagues are next level. There's nothing anywhere close to it as far as the realism. Don Ewing chiming in saying, anytime the Yankees lose or are losing is a good day, haha. And Arnie says truth. Yeah, you know what, though? The Jays, and maybe it's everybody hating the Yankees. And I guess that you could put the Dodgers in for the National League, I guess. But it kind of comes across as Jamie was talking about, Jamie Thomas, I think it was, about the inferiority complex. So I grew up in Manitoba. Everybody in Brandon hates Winnipeg. There's an inferiority complex. You're jealous of the big city or whatever. So I wonder if that's just Jays fans that just hate the Yankees. Or I think it might be everybody that universally doesn't like the Yankees except for Yankee fans. So here's a question for Don, for Arnie. Do you put your hate aside to win fantasy? Oh, Francis TFO gets it done. He's dancing at the U.S. Open. Nice. 3-set win. On to the semis. What a day. What a scene. It's like last night when Kyrgios lost. It was a cool scene. So Don says, for me, it was them just buying the best players and not producing them themselves. And he says, I don't think we have any Yankees on our team. LOL. Yeah, they did. But buying the player is one thing. And signing free agents, all teams do that. But they also traded, like they made trades for some players, and they used some of their organization. I agree. I think the Yankees, traditionally have spent more in free agency. When people say that to the Dodgers, I counter it, and I'd be like, go look at some of the homegrown talent in there. And if you use your homegrown talent to trade for players, that's just as fine, in my opinion. You're still using them in a way to improve. So, I don't know. I don't really care what team my players play for. Like, I have the Giants closer, Doval, on my fantasy team because he's going to get points. So I think probably I used to be like that when I was younger and maybe not as smart. Now I try to be a little bit more smarter, and it depends on what you're in. If you're in the UFLB, you know, and I'm joking with Don. I know that they wouldn't not draft Yankees if Aaron Judge was there and it was available and they need him, they would do that. But if you're in your $20, $40 fantasy leagues, you can have a no flames rule. That's whatever. If you're in like $1,000 league with massive entry fees like ours, you have to be smarter and you have to say, hey, we've got to be smart. We got to take the players that are going to help us get it done. So yeah, Francis TFO getting it done, and it's scoreless between the Dodgers and the Giants at the end of 2. This one just primarily has fantasy implications. There's certainly no way anybody is catching the Dodgers in the LA West. All right, as we've talked about, some afternoon baseball, Dodgers, Giants, scoreless. Yankees, the last time I looked, were losing. Now it's 3-3 between the Yankees and the Twins. So it certainly looks like the Yankees and the youngster that we told you that was making his first start, Varland, is out of the game now. So not surprising, but pretty impressive. 5 1/3, goes 7, strikes out 7, does give up the 1 home run. I'll just check right now. And yeah, Aaron Judge, 55 home runs. Fantasy fans, Aaron Judge getting it done with his 55th home run. Gleyber Torres also with his 19th. So Twins, Yankees tied at 3. That has so many implications because the Yankees, they want to obviously keep their lead in the American League East, which is down to 4.5 games. For Minnesota, they lose this division race with Cleveland, they're out. They're not getting in the wild card. So that game, Cleveland will be watching very carefully. We'll keep you updated on some stats coming out of that game for you fantasy poolies and all that fun stuff. So Yankees, Twins, more afternoon baseball as well. The Brewers and the Rockies. Rockies up 7-1 in that one. And I know there are some fantasy teams out there that are hoping that the Rockies can get healthy. Trejo has a home run in that one, and Togila as well, if you're keeping track at home. All right, so in the National Hockey League, you see this where is it? Jersey over my shoulder there, the Montreal Canadiens jersey. Threw that up because the Montreal Canadiens signed a player today in Kirby Dach. And now the Montreal Canadiens made a big splash at the draft when they traded for Kirby Dach from the Chicago Blackhawks. And today they signed the youngster who hails from my neck of the woods, Fort Saskatchewan, which is just outside of Edmonton as well. So the Canadiens signed the restricted free agent to a 4-year, $13.45 million deal. So just over $3.3 million per season for the next 4 years. Obviously, it's a bridge deal. These bridge deals make me nervous. It's why Darnell Nurse ended up with $9 million. And it's way too much. But it's also like a show me, like go out and get it done. You know, Kirby Dach had an incredible start to the season with Chicago in his rookie season, and then ended up breaking his wrist at the World Juniors. Never got on track in the last 2 years, and Chicago has been terrible. So Kirby Dach has some show me to do, in my opinion. Again, Chicago was horror awful, and we're going to get to Chicago later in our team-by-team preview. Montreal's a much better fit on the rise. Chicago's, obviously, they traded everybody but Kane and Taves. Seth Jones, I guess, is still there as well. But it's interesting. I think this is a sensible deal from the standpoint of the Montreal Canadiens. And I think Kirby Dach, we'll wait and see where Kirby Dach fits in the depth chart with the Montreal Canadiens. They have some questions this year going, not about, specific talent by any means. But what does Juraj Slafkovsky do? Carey Price looks like he's out. He's out for the season. Like, I'm looking at this depth chart on, I think this is on Cap Friendly. This must be old. They don't even have some of these guys on here. So, Kirby Dach's got to play for the Canadiens this year. He's got to prove himself, in my opinion. Because he just got a contract, and he wants to get another contract in 4 years. But he's got to make his way into this lineup. Right now, I'm on Puckpedia now. They got him slotted in the third line center. You know who they don't have on that team is Juraj Slafkovsky. And maybe it's smart that they don't. You know, maybe obviously you wait and see what happens at camp, but don't rush the guy. Kirby Dach, I think by the end of the season, Kirby Dach has an opportunity to overtake Christian Dvorak. Christian Dvorak right now is listed on this Puckpedia Daily Faceoff as the number 2 center. I think down the road as this season goes on, we're going to see that change. I think you'll see Kirby Dach, if he progresses, to move into that number 2 center position. Now, the other guy that signed a big deal today that's not going to go into effect until next year is Tim Stützle of the Ottawa Senators. Love this guy. Love this player. He was awesome to watch at the World Juniors and the World Championships. He's in the final year of his entry-level deal, $925,000. Next year, the deal kicks in. 8 years, $66.8 million. And I know the Royals in the UFHL loving that. Arnie's got to love it. He's got to love that deal because $8 million for a guy of Tim Stützle's caliber could look like an absolute steal. I mean, look at Leon Draisaitl's contract right now. And I'm not saying Stützle's going to reach the same heights as his German counterpart, but $8 million looks good. Like, we traded in fantasy for Thomas Hertl the other day because we think he's going to make that contract look good. There are some contracts that I don't think are going to look good. As I mentioned, Darnell Nurse, $9 million. Jeff Skinner right now, even though there's production, it's $9 million. At some point, that Dougie Hamilton contract, and we have him in fantasy, probably not going to be that great. But there are other contracts that you're like, holy man, that is good. Like Cale Makar's deal, even right now, is sick. So you have to look at deals and say, you know, what is it like now? Okay, what is it going to be like in 4 years when the cap is at maybe $90 million? And I think that Stützle deal is going to be a steal. Larry Fisher chiming in, Slafkovsky and Monahan both missing from that lineup. Intrigued to see how they actually line up on the opening night. Yeah, I think, you know, like Slafkovsky, I can definitely see not starting in Montreal. Doesn't have to. You can go to the minors. You can play in Laval, I think, is their farm team. So we'll see on that one. Dach and Monahan, to me, are like, you know, I guess familiarity maybe pushes Dvorak into that spot, but I would think Kirby Dach should, if he progresses, overtake that spot at some point, and Sean Monahan may end up being the 4th line center in Montreal. Expensive this year, but motivated for sure in the final year of his contract. So Ottawa, Montreal, massive changes. Almost like the North Stars and Duckman's domination. Who else made some big moves? Snipers, Battlehawks, lots of teams making moves in the offseason. Obviously, Kamikaze, Rock Republic going crazy, trading everything. I think they own every draft pick. They're like, you remember when Ditka traded all of his draft picks for Ricky Williams? How'd that work out? But anyway, those guys have a ton of draft picks, and I have a ton of their players, as do a lot of other people in our league. One NFL note before we duck out for a commercial break and then bring in Larry Fisher of Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. He is our head of hockey. But Joe Flacco, it's Joe Flacco time in New York for the Jets because Zach Wilson is out until Week 4 with a knee injury. That means the veteran will be starting Week 1 against his former team, the Ravens. I asked you, NFL fans, and particularly Jet fans, if there are any tuning in to the Twitch stream, what will the Jets' record be after 4 weeks of Joe Flacco? Chime in on our Twitch message chat or hit me up on Twitter at Duck Millard, at UFS Network. What will the New York Jets' record be after 4 weeks of Joe Flacco before Zach Wilson is, I'm going to say 1-3. I think for whatever reason, Joe Flacco is going to beat the Ravens and then lose 3 weeks in a row. So I say 1-3 is the Jets' record after 4 weeks of Joe Flacco. If you're a Joe Flacco fan, maybe you're hoping the Jets are 3-1 and he keeps the job. Like, what would you do? Like, Joe Flacco comes out 4-0, runs the table? You're not taking him out. Not going to happen. If Joe Flacco comes out 4-0,
strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Indeed. That would be the strangest thing. We might have to steal that late Stranger Things and have a segment of strange things that could happen in the world of sports. And Joe Flacco and the New York Jets going 4-0 would definitely factor in that department.
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Indeed. Okay, we're going to duck out for a short break. We'll get our next guest, Larry Fisher, all lined up to go. Looking forward to chatting with Larry about a couple of these signings as well. Is Jake Paul for real? Like, am I the idiot for not believing in Jake Paul, or is everybody else kind of crazy for jumping on this Jake Paul bandwagon? Are we going to find out against Anderson Silva? Is this just a publicity stunt? Larry will set the record straight when we come back. In the meantime, here's a funny video for you. How about mascots crushing kids at halftime? This is Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily. We're back right away. All right, before people start getting mad about all those kids getting smoked by mascots, just remember, those mascots take a lot of abuse. Like Jamie told the story the other day, one of the craziest stories about mascots. They take a lot of abuse, and it's really hot in those costumes. So they just have to take out their frustration sometimes on, really cocky young kids in football games at half times. All right, really excited to bring in Larry Fisher now, who's going to join us weekly on the program here. And, of course, he is the insider on UFHL now, which we will be revving up right away. But, Larry, some NHL news today regarding one RFA and one guy who gets an extension. Let's start with Kirby Dach in Montreal. We remember Kirby Dach having that hot start, and ever since then, it's been quite cool. Is this a bit of a show-me contract? Obviously, it's a bridge deal where the Montreal Canadiens and Kirby Dach are both saying, let's see what we have here.
A bit surprising that Dach went to 4 years at that $4.3 million cap hit. Usually a bridge is 2 or 3 years if it's like Puljujärvi did in Edmonton and other guys have done. So I'm surprised that Montreal, obviously Kent Hughes, former agent, he's good at negotiations. I'm a bit surprised that he was able to get, the third and the fourth year at that price, because I know we're going to talk about Tim Stützle as well. And there's a $5 million difference now between Stützle and Dach, and they're both third overall picks in the NHL draft. So if you're in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League like the Grizzlies and you got Kirby Dach at 4.3 for the next that number of years, it's a steal of a deal in a cap league compared to I got that wrong. So 3.3 for Dach. So that's a steal of a deal, especially that's actually below league average, Dean. League average heading into this year, when you average out all the contracts, is going to be around $4 million. So to lock up a third overall pick for 4 years at below the league average at $3.3 million for Montreal and Kent Hughes, that's a huge win. And I do think for Kirby Dach, it is a prove-me contract. We've seen guys like Dylan Strome who haven't really popped as third overall picks, and I don't think that the body of work, like I said, there's been injuries in there, but the body of work doesn't say he deserves the $8 million. He's not popping the way Stützle and some other third overall picks have. But I think value-wise, that's a great deal to get that third and fourth year on the bridge for the Montreal Canadiens, especially because not too many players coming out of their entry-level contracts are going the bridge route anymore. Most of them want that $5 million, $7 million plus kind of second contract. So I think the Canadiens, and like I said, in a dynasty league with a full cap setup like the Grizzlies have with Kirby Dach in the UFHL, knowing that you're going to have Kirby Dach for the next 4 years, 3 of those years, the Royals are going to have Tim Stützle essentially $5 million more for 3 out of those 4 years. I'd rather take the cheap guy and assume even if he gets $10 million on his next deal, he's earned it, and he's been good value at that 3.3 for 4 years if he does get a big contract on his next one.
Well, and it's really interesting. We were talking, you chimed in on the chat about the lineup for the Montreal Canadiens. And we're going to preview the Chicago Blackhawks next segment where Kirby Dach played. But the Montreal Canadiens lineup, do they fit Slafkovsky in there? Where does Kirby Dach? Depending on what site you look at, you see Christian Dvorak is the number 2. Some places have Dach number 2, then Sean Monahan. So there's some moving parts with this Montreal Canadiens roster that has to be sorted out at training camp, which could make fantasy owners a little bit, nervous whether a guy like Slafkovsky, is going to be in the lineup, where a guy like Dach where is he going to play in that Montreal Canadiens lineup to start? I have to think Kirby Dach has to be eyeing up that number 2 center spot and saying, that's mine for the taking.
I think those two could be a real dynamic duo, Dach and Slafkovsky, 2 big, powerful guys that skate well. But at the same time, you got 2 finesse players on the top line with Caulfield and Suzuki. I know we're both looking at that daily face-off lineup, and Arnie made a joke about it in the chat that Mike Hoffman is this 1999 or 2009 that he's on the top line. But that spot where they have Hoffman, I mean, that's kind of earmarked for a big power forward guy like Slafkovsky to play with Caulfield and Suzuki. But do you want 3 young guys like that? Or, obviously you got a guy like Josh Anderson that could slide up there as well, big power forward. But I really like the potential stack, and I'm sure they had that in mind when they traded for Kirby Dach on the same day they drafted Juraj Slafkovsky is imagine these two playing together, whether it's this year or next year. So again, getting that value done for Doc. And from Doc's side, I think, new team, new environment, you're settling into Montreal. You want to be there on day one of training camp, which is next week. You don't want to let this contract linger any longer. So maybe there was only, a 1 year at $2 million or, 4 years at 3.3, or I don't know what other offers were on the table, or was it take it or leave it on the bridge? I'm not sure, but certainly he wants to be there from day one of camp and find his fit in that lineup. Like I said, if Sean Monahan's healthy, where does he go? Because obviously guys like Christian Dvorak and Jake Evans can move to the wing if need be. Dvorak's played a lot of wing. You could slide Monahan or Doc in that spot. Who knows with Jonathan Drouin, and he's had some off-ice issues, and he's kind of easing his way back into hockey, making a return this season by the sounds of it, as well as Paul Byron, who's had concussion issues and injuries. So there could be two holes right there. If Drouin and Byron aren't good to go, then you slide in Monahan and Slafkovsky. But some people wonder about Monahan if he's actually healthy and going to pass his physical, much like a guy like Mark Stone in Vegas. There's always some uncertainty because they do have to get through the physical to start training camp. But assuming that Monahan's healthy, I think he could slide in. I think Dvorak would be the natural to move to the wing, and either Doc moves up or Monahan slides in there. But it is a fascinating lineup because the forward depth, as you're going through these NHL team previews, and you're going to see Chicago has next to no depth today. But as you're going through these previews, and when you pick first overall in the NHL draft, you always think, okay, that's a rebuilding team. They're going to be terrible for the next 5 years. Then you look at this forward depth chart and you go, wow, Montreal's got 4 lines that can score, and then you got Marty St. Louis, who was above 500 as a coach when he took over, and all of a sudden are they a 1 year reload, and is this a team that can challenge? But they also have holes on defense, and we know Carey Price isn't going to be back, so obviously with Jake Allen and Sam Montembeault, who knows what happens in goal? And right now they got 2 rookies penciled in on defense, Dean, Justin Barron on the right side and Jordan Harris on the left. So potential there for a trade of one of these forwards we've been talking about to bring in some more help on the back end.
Yeah, and like you said, that front line, like when you look at the Dobber Hockey preview, that front line of Drouin, Suzuki, and Cole Caulfield, that's a light line. It's a very skilled line, but it's a light line. So you might want to move some guys up, and Doc has some experience. Maybe he has some size, or I think Brendan Gallagher can still play in your top 6 at times because of his physicality. But there's going to be a time where Brendan Gallagher is going to slip into a third line role, and it seems like the Montreal Canadiens have those guys now. Gallagher is he's one of those fantasy awesome MVPs, like a Brad Marchand, right? Because he just hits so many categories. So the Gallagher owners out of there in fantasy are like, no, just give us like 1 or 2 more years of top 6 minutes.
Especially if hits are a category in your league. And one thing I should mention, Dean, on Slafkovsky, I came across this tweet right before we came on, but if Slafkovsky doesn't make the NHL right away, he will essentially be the first forward taken first overall since 1989, Matt Sundin, to not make the NHL right out of the gate. So that was Byron Bader on Twitter, and he said it's an interesting storyline. The only other 2 since Matt Sundin in 1989, if you're a forward picked first overall, you're in the NHL the next year. The only other 2 were Eric Lindros. He had the holdout with Quebec and Philadelphia situation, and Alex Ovechkin, the lockout year in 2004. Other than those guys obviously would have been in the NHL as star players if star rookies had they been eligible. So if he starts in the AHL, or if they considered sending him back to the Liga, he would be the first forward taken first overall in, how many years is that? 1989 since Sundin. So, but in saying that, Dean, one thing we have to remember about this year's draft class is, a lot of them lost a lot of development with COVID. So they haven't played as much hockey as normal. Right. So, he wasn't a dominant force in Liga by any means. He was good, but he wasn't dominant in the Finnish league. So, some AHL time could be beneficial, especially when you look at that depth chart and there's not really an obvious spot for him unless, again, you take Mike Hoffman out and you take Jonathan Drouin out and you take Paul Byron out. Then some spots open up, and that'll all play out as training camp opens and those storylines evolve. But I definitely think in training camp, Dean, and in the preseason, they're going to give him a showcase. They're going to let him play with Suzuki and Caulfield, or let him play with Doc and Anderson, or whatever the case, right? They're going to try and get Slafkovsky into that lineup, but it'll be interesting to see if he actually sticks beyond the 9 games to start the season, or at all to start the season, because the history says he should be in the NHL as a forward taken first overall.
Well, it really had a negative effect on Matt Sundin's career to not play in the NHL right away. I mean, I don't know why it's this, Owen Power didn't play right away as a defenseman. I don't know why the Oilers rushed Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or Nail Yakupov in their 3 straight number 1 overalls. There's some guys where you're like, yeah, okay, that guy is definitely an NHL player. And then there's other guys that you're like, why? Why do you do it? So, Laval seems the obvious choice for me because he stays in North America and he can come up if he really, really gets good as opposed to bringing him all the way over. So, obviously let training camp dictate it, but the thought that every first overall pick or high pick needs to start in the NHL is asinine.
And a part of that is because of the entry-level contract and needing those cheap cap hits, especially with a flat cap now and the cap not going up. Again, does Shane Wright make Seattle? I don't think Simon Nemitz is going to play in New Jersey. Arnie's probably going to pipe in here and say, yes, he is. But again, a lot of these, and he's a defenseman, so that's a little bit different story. But a lot of these high-end guys, the reason they've went straight to the NHL is, they're good enough to be eased into the lineup in some capacity. But in a lot of cases, I think it is that they're a cheap asset and they want to maximize the 3 years at cheap because they don't. It's either bring them in or you sign Sam Gagner or a veteran guy on the tail end of his career, Jake Virtanen. Who would you rather have? If they need one, like right now we're looking at that depth chart, they don't need him. But if they had a forward spot open for him, do you want Jake Virtanen at $900,000 or do you want Juraj Slafkovsky at $1 million? So it is interesting, and I think that's why a lot of these players get rushed. Is A, they're selling them to the fan base, but B, I think that their contract in the cap situation is gravy. But that contract's the same whether they start next year or the year after. They're still going to be $1 million. So I agree with you. I think Laval's right next door. Same province, get them settled in. I think Laval makes a lot of sense.
Arnie says, I think Paul Byron is injured to start the year. So, and obviously lots of things, like you said, guys that might not pass their physicals. I will tell you, we certainly checked into Sean Monahan's health before we traded for him. And, I think we have a pretty good source in Craig Button, who has a brother in the Flames organization. And Craig, reassured me that, Monahan was healthy. Now, where he was fitting into the lineup then was a big question mark. And he's not, obviously, because he's in Montreal now. But I did have it on good authority that he is healthy and ready to go. Arnie says, no, I hope he doesn't for 2 years. Too many ELCs going at once for us. We aren't your traditional rebuild. Quit calling it a rebuild. Like, it's not a rebuild when you're predicted to be the number 1 team. So stop saying it's a rebuild. It's like, we are a rebuild. The North Stars are a rebuild. The Royals won the league and traded away some players and are still good. So Arnie's not allowed to use the word rebuild anymore.
One more cheap year of Tim Stützle, Arnie, and then next year he's an $8.3 million player. So the Royals, that cap situation will tighten up a bit as, Kent Johnson will get his 3 years now or 2 more years. But it'll be interesting. Again, managing the cap is such a big part of the ultimate fantasy hockey league. But Arnie's, he's always thinking one step ahead. He's got that all mapped out, how he's going to. Again, I think one thing with the Royals, Dean, is you look at even this off looking for older players, Palmieri, Parise, Perry. It's because those guys are going to retire at their cap hits, whether it's next year or the year after, and they got the next wave ready to come right in with these young guys. So I think, they like that veteran leadership, and they need the guys. Alex Ovechkin, hopefully he chases Wayne Gretzky down and plays 5 more years or 6 more years and keeps scoring 40 goals for the Royals in the UFHL, and they want that supporting cast. They're not going to go into a total rebuild while they have Alex Ovechkin as the face of the franchise, but I think they keep those veteran guys around, knowing that those spots are spoken for in the future, put it that way.
Okay, so you mentioned Stützle, and he signs a deal, and not surprising, this guy has been a star since day one in the World Juniors with Ottawa, 22 goals last year. And, this Ottawa team is really, really interesting now when you look at how they have, kind of built themselves through the draft, kind of by trading at the draft, right? Like they went into that draft and came out of it looking very different because of making some moves. And, you've got like where you've got so much fun to play with in this top 6. This Ottawa top 6 for fantasy perspective, it's like get as many of these guys as you can because they're going to be fun and they're going to be offensive.
And barring injury, Dean, I think DJ Smith will have a system in place to still play strong defensive hockey as well. And I really think, barring injuries, Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo, that division, it's kind of like you said, some of the divisions, your division, the OR division in the UFHL with the Snipers and Duckmans and those franchises all pushing up at once. That's what's happening in that Atlantic division. But you're right, that top 6 in Ottawa right now, who knows how they're going to start camp, but right now it's sort of penciled in that Stützle is going to have Claude Giroux, the homecoming of Claude Giroux on one wing, and the new guy, Alex DeBrincat, on the other wing. Well, it's pretty easy to project. If you're centering DeBrincat and Giroux, you're going to have a monster year. He might hit 80 points. He might hit 30 goals, 50 assists kind of type season for Tim Stützle. It's going to be a big year. He's set up for a big year with that line combo if that's what they go with. And obviously then you think, oh, wow, that's a great first line. But then you're still looking up at Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, and Drake Batherson. So if no injuries in that top 6, Ottawa is going to be a fun team to watch. They've solidified the goaltending with Cam Talbot and Anton Forsberg there. And again, they're going to bring in some youth on the back end as well. Jake Sanderson's going to play, and they re-signed Eric Brandstrom, and Thomas Chabot still just entering his prime. He's going to log 30 minutes a night. So overall, that Ottawa franchise is a bit of a sleeper when you get to that team preview. Who's the breakout player there? They have lots of potential breakout players, even a guy like Shane, if he's healthy and ready to go to start the year.
Yeah, I just look at the top 6 is really, really exciting. And I mean Tim Stützle, this is, we always talk about this, like what's this contract going to look at in year X, right? People do that with Zach Hyman, the contract that the Oilers signed him to. Yeah, it might not be as fun down the stretch, but if it helps you win a cup or something, it's worth it. This is a contract in Tim Stützle, like his countryman Leon Draisaitl, that's going to look really good potentially in the next couple of years. Like, this could be an $8 million player that's putting up 85 to 100 points in between there, with the cap going up. Like, it could look like an absolute steal. These guys that are signing these $8 million deals, Thomas Hertl, that's why we traded for him in fantasy, because, you hope the cap goes up. It's not a flat cap, and $8 million looks really, really good in a couple of years.
It's going to, absolutely, Dean, and a great analogy with Leon Draisaitl, because he's only slightly, Leon's at 8.5 and then Tim's at 8.3, so he almost became the highest paid German player right there. But very exciting for Ottawa, and again, like I said, when you're extending these guys with a year left in their ELC still, Jack Hughes last summer, those guys, you're getting them this entire contract. You're getting them in their prime. JT Miller just signed a similar deal, $8 million deal, but or Johnny Gaudreau at 10.5, but you're getting those guys in the back half of their career into their mid to late 30s. Here, you're getting, like I said, it's very similar to Leon Draisaitl, where, Leon Draisaitl's got 3 years left. Well, at the end of that contract, Leon Draisaitl's still at the back end of his prime. He's still in his late 20s. He's still going to be, potentially scoring 50 goals a year. And again, I think Tim Stützle is going to grow into this contract. Even if he had, a 70 or 60 point season this year, yeah, okay, it might not have lived up to expectations, or maybe he hits an injury, but you still got 7, or that contract only starts next year. So, he's still got that entire runway of, production throughout his prime at a guaranteed price. And again, you look at guys, look what Sidney Crosby's making still. Look what Nathan McKinnon, he's got his last year at 6.3. When those guys signed those contracts, those were pretty big contracts, but the cap moved. And I think you nailed it, Dean. I don't think this flat cap, they said record year for revenues for the NHL this past season coming out of COVID. That's only going to get bigger and bigger with it. You've seen how much they pushed, the sports betting and everything else. They got tons of new revenue streams. I think the NHL is going to continue to set records. And I predicted, and that was a bold prediction, that I think the NHL ceiling is going to be $100 million before 2030 for sure, but potentially, 5 years from now. I think it's going to start jumping by $4 to $5 million a year, starting next. I could see it going from 82.5 to 86.5 or 87.5 already next year. And then, like I said, then you start looking at these $8 million guys as a bargain, as that league average goes from 4 million closer to 6 million. And again, we're talking hockey. Then you look at baseball and basketball and football, and it looks like they're all making peanuts comparatively. But for the NHL side, I do think the cap is inevitably going to go up, and I really think guys like Tim Stützle will be a bargain by the end of this contract.
Yeah, when you get into the other sports compared to the NHL, it's actually quite ridiculous. But it's all about revenues, right? So you're not going to pay more than what you're bringing in. All right, so a lot of people have just finished up their fantasy football drafts, getting ready for the season opener tomorrow between the Rams and the Bills, and now they can start turning their attention towards hockey drafts, as some of those will. I would hope there's not a hockey draft this early because it's still a few weeks away from camp or whatever it is. But let's talk about some Calder favorites. For those people doing a little bit of pre-draft research, who are a few names that, and like we just said, it's hard to kind of predict because are guys going to stick? Are they not? And is there going to be somebody coming up from the AHL or from Europe this year that really stands out? Who are a few names that you're kind of circling a little early for the Calder race in the NHL?
Well, that's a great question, Dean, because usually you're looking at those forwards that were taken at the top of the draft. You're always thinking that the first overall pick is going to be in the conversation for the Calder. But if Slafkovsky starts in Laval and Shane Wright might even go back to Kingston, who knows what Seattle's going to do, then you're looking at guys like Mason McTavish, who we just saw as World Junior MVP. He's going to get some prime minutes in Anaheim. You're looking at some of these guys, obviously, Owen Power, Kent Johnson, these guys that played that year of college and are now coming into the league. So like those three would come to mind immediately, Mason McTavish, Kent Johnson, Owen Power, as guys that were drafted last year. They got another year of maturity. Even if Slafkovsky and Wright play, I would still lean to the extra year of experience. And that's where you kind of said, Dean, it didn't hurt Matt Sundin to go back home. It didn't hurt, Mason McTavish to eventually wind his way back to junior, or certainly didn't hurt Owen Power to play another year of college hockey and get all the Hockey Canada experiences under his belt. But those three come to mind. But it will be an interesting Calder race if it doesn't feature Slafkovsky or Shane Wright in the NHL this year, because we're so used to, top of mind, who's going to win the Calder? It was whoever was the first. Like next year at this time, Connor Bedard's going to be the Calder favorite because he's going to be, knock on wood, presumed to be the first overall pick, and it'll just be automatically assumed that this Calder race starts with Connor Bedard. But this year, I don't think it starts with Slafkovsky and Wright necessarily. I think, like I said, Power, Johnson, McTavish, some of those guys are certainly going to make some noise.
What about a guy on this roster for the San Jose Sharks and William Eklund? What do you think his chances are?
Absolutely. I think San Jose's rebuilding, so I think they have all the motivation to feed him, power play one time. And then, if he starts strong and he's out there with Meyer and Hurdle or something, it's going to be interesting to see the deployment. But I think comparatively to Montreal, again, when I look at that Montreal roster, I see a team that's still kind of on the fringes of, could maybe be in the playoff race. Whereas San Jose, I see a team that's rebuilding more so, traded away Brent Burns and stuff. So I really think Mike Greer is going to focus on development there with trying to think, coach, former New York Rangers coach is their college coach.
David Quinn.
David Quinn, there you go. So skipped my mind, but I think David Quinn again will really focus on development. He'll be great for William Eklund, and I think again, because if they're losing games, it's all about getting experience. So why not roll him out there on the top power play and get him playing with your best players? He's going to be part of the future of that franchise. If they're in the Bedard sweepstakes or whatever, then certainly he'll get lots of prime opportunity this year. And I think he could have been in the Calder race last year. I think if he would have stayed, he looked good in San Jose. So another year of experience back home. I really think William Eklund, another guy that comes to mind now that we're talking about Swedish forwards, is obviously Alexander Holtz. Right. I don't know, New Jersey's kind of like Montreal. New Jersey's forward depth looks really good without Holtz in that top 12. But you put him in there with Jack Hughes, and all of a sudden Holtz-Hughes, then you're looking at Holtz as a 40-goal rookie and a Calder candidate. So it's very interesting. But I do think William Eklund has a legitimate shot to be a sleeper in the Calder race because of his opportunities he's going to get in San Jose.
All right, I want to talk about some MMA in just a second, or just combat sports in a second. But our scouting platform here at Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports, you kind of oversee all of scouting as well as hockey. It is so unique for people watching if they want to get involved. It's UFFsports.com. But the uniqueness is that, if I'm a hockey scout and I go to a college football game and I see a player that looks pretty good, I can list that player. You can scout in all sports as long as you're not an owner of a franchise in that sport, and it's really cool. I mean, one of our, I work have an affiliation with High Level Scouting, which my wife owns, and Connor Halley's our football scout. We got offered, somebody wants to buy one of our players today. So it's a really cool concept for people that, have an eye for talent or just want to give it a try. What's the best way you can advise somebody on getting involved in the scouting game and how it can be like real world scouting? Well, it is real world scouting, but it can feel like you are an actual scout.
A great place to train and learn and network. We have on the platform, Dean, across the 4 major North American sports, we have 168 registered. And the crossover appeal is very interesting. You mentioned the going from sport to sport, because actually a guy, Chris Crowell, who's very big on the football and basketball platform or leagues in UFFS. He's a GM, he's a scout, he's got some of the top prospects there. He registered to be in the open market draft for hockey. And so I was kind of weeding it out to see, like, okay, who's actually going to be a hockey scout or who's just going to show up for a couple cheap prospects and then bail. And messaged Chris, and here he's born and raised in Edmonton. I had no idea he was Canadian or from Edmonton. So that's kind of his rite of passage to be a hockey scout. He's an Edmonton guy to start with, and then he grew up playing hockey. So very interesting. But yeah, definitely it's as close to, or it is real world scouting, but you're really just trying to find who are going to be these next top prospects across all sports. And you're right, Dean. If you're watching a college football game and you're a hockey scout, you can get on there and jump on the football site and register that college football player. And we do have a lot of scouts. Arnie as well is another one that has football prospects as well as hockey. So does Gur Doltak. So it's very cool, the crossover, and then again, a lot of these agencies are bringing it. I think this is an important point, Dean. A lot of our UFFS agencies are now bringing on talent like Wise Guys Prospects did with Ash Glover. You go find the talent. We'll pay for our agency will fund your operating budget and we'll give you. So you find the talent. You don't have to spend any of your own money. We want your expertise. You come work for our agency. Find us the list of players. Register we'll fund you to register the players, and we'll give you 80% of their profit or 60% of the profit. So all you're doing is spending your time scouting, which you would be doing anyway if you're making mock drafts and rankings and stuff. Get involved. Reach out to some of these agencies that are some of them are high wealth agencies. They have a big operating budget. They'd love to bring on more expertise, scouts with expertise underneath them, and they'll fund you to go out and find the talent for their feeder agency. And when that talent grows into the UFHL or into the UFAFL or one of the main pro leagues, or they receive some leasing revenue, they will share that. That'll be your payout. So you're putting in the time up front, and then you're going to get the payout, even though it's not your money that's being spent to register or buy these players in the futures auctions. You're going to benefit. So you actually are almost working for a real world agency and getting a salary of sorts without spending out of pocket. So just by knowing the talent pool across sports, there's a lot of opportunities with agencies on the UFFS platform.
Yeah, that's High Level Scouting, our affiliated agency. Craig Button is their head scout and their director of scouting, a former GM and Stanley Cup champion. And we have Connor Halley in football. So it's exactly right. You find the talent, and everybody has their own sort of deals. How about this? The Grizzlies, Andrea Karanduk chiming in saying Dylan Holloway as a sleeper for the Calder Trophy. And again, another guy that might have a hard time fighting for ice time with that Edmonton Oilers top 6 depth chart. Certainly it's going to be hard for him to get any kind of power play time. There's about 5 guys that get all the power play time there. Arnie saying good call on Holloway. Haven't thought about him. Has anyone checked the betting odds? I just think it's going to be hard for him to get the playing time he's going to be needed, as opposed to a guy like Eklund that you mentioned, who's going to get fed a lot of playing time.
I agree, Dean. Obviously, if the Oilers were to trade a guy like Warren Foegele prior to the season, which they still need room potentially, depending how they structure. There are also, I seen Low Tide, the Athletic, did a way for the Oilers to get under the cap, even though they're $2.5 million over right now with their current talent pool. They could do that by keeping Dylan. Again, there's your cheap ELC. They could keep him on the opening 8 roster, send down Derek Ryan, send down some of these vets making more than Holloway, and kind of be a way to get him a roster spot. He would need a strong showing in preseason because we all know Ken Holland is very likes to let even now that they've signed Ryan Murray, I think Philip Broberg needs a big preseason, or he might end up back in the AHL too. They're not going to rush their top prospects. Edmonton won't. So I expect Holloway, especially coming off injury and missing a lot of last season, and they'd like him down there with a guy like Carter Savoy. And actually the other one, if you want to go even deeper on the sleepers for Edmonton, Dean, is Xavier Bourgault. He's coming off such a good season in the Q, and a lot of people think his hockey sense, somewhat similar to like an Anthony Beauvillier type player, even gets the Claude Giroux comparison sometimes, but they think he's a smart enough player that he could kind of do what Yamamoto did and play on any line up and down the lineup. So Bourgault even is getting a little bit of talk as an Oiler forward that could potentially crack the roster. But again, for Holloway and Bourgault to fit in, I think, either Puljujarvi or Warren Fogle need to be traded, or obviously and then there's going to be training camp across the league. UFHL franchises don't want to hear that. They're all crossing their fingers that none of their players go down in the preseason. But if Edmonton had an injury to a winger, if Zach Hyman or Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or somebody like that went down, then boom, the door's wide open for a Holloway or a Bourgault. So those guys are coming to camp thinking they're going to be on the roster. They're going to try and make the team. But as far as the betting odds go for the Calder, I would expect that Holloway would be outside of the top 10 as of now. Just like I said, the opportunity's not there in Edmonton like it is for William Eklund in San Jose.
Okay, let's chat about this. I'll admit I'm not Jake Paul aficionado expert, other than what I see on the peripheral. So tell me, is this guy for real? Is it still a joke? Is it a publicity stunt? Should we take this guy more seriously? You have a much broader scope of the fight game than I do. I mean, I look at this from an outset and think this guy's going to get crushed by Anderson Silva. Do you have a different viewpoint?
Anderson Silva's an entertainer. Throughout his UFC career, he's always been an entertainer, and he sometimes will play possum and drag a fight out. And I hope Anderson comes out and front kicks him in the face, to be honest. And that's that for Jake Paul's combat sports career. But it's boxing and it's different. But Anderson Silva was just in there with Julio Chavez Jr. and speed bagged him. And then Chavez Jr. was a world champion, and he's only in his – Anderson's older than him. I think Chavez Jr. is in his late 30s. And that was in Mexico, and the judges still gave the decision to Anderson. That's how badly he speed bagged a professional boxer who was a world champion. And that was only a year ago. So like Dana White said, this is a real fight for Jake Paul. This is a real test. I think Jake Paul is an athlete. I think we see what his brother Logan Paul's even doing in WWE, the moves he's pulling off there. And these guys are absolutely, they're good athletes, good natural athletic ability. They wrestled in high school, played football, all the rest. Anderson Silva's a world-class striker. The guys that Jake Paul previously fought, Ben Askren was a world-class wrestler. Tyrone Woodley became a good striker, but his base was in wrestling. Anderson Silva is, a legendary striker in the game, and then he's always had great hand speed, great angles, great footwork. He modeled a lot of, even though he was in MMA, he loved Roy Jones Jr. He always wanted that boxing match with Roy Jones Jr. when they were both in their prime, or Jones was at the end of his prime. But so I think this for Anderson, he's going to have fun in there. I think he's an entertainer. I don't think he's going to go out and try and finish Jake in the first round and make some big emphatic statement on behalf of the entire MMA community that Jake Paul's not for real. But I do think one thing, you see different people speaking out about Jake Paul that have trained with him. He does have power. I mean, the shots he landed on Woodley and Ben Askren, they didn't take a dive. It wasn't WWE. Some people will say it is they were paid off, or they had some sort of combination where you could read Jake's hands went to lower your hands and he was going to hit you and just fall. But I mean, if you watched it, those were legitimate knockouts. There's some legitimate power behind his hands. So, but again, I mean, I think Anderson will toy with him and have some fun and be an entertainer, kind of like Floyd Mayweather did with Logan Paul. I think it'll be an entertainment production more than a fight. But if it gets to a slugfest or a true combat sports fight, obviously I would have put my money on Anderson Silva, even though he's 20 years older than Jake Paul. But yeah, Jake Paul's growing on me because he's dedicated himself to the sport. He does have great training partners, great coaches. He's trying to become legit, and and at the same time, he's putting boxing back on the map. And no offense to guys like Bud Crawford and the true champs that would definitely speed bag Jake Paul at any weight class. But again, he is raising the profile of boxing. He's good for boxing. He's good for sport. And I wouldn't miss that fight. I won't miss this weekend's fight. Khamzat Chimaev and Nate Diaz. That's going to be a barn burner in the UFC. See who the real gangster is, like Khamzat says. That's going to be a great fight, Chimaev and Diaz. But as far as a spectacle goes, it doesn't get much bigger than Jake Paul and Anderson Silva. And obviously, if Jake Paul was to make another emphatic statement and somehow knock out Anderson Silva, I really do think then that the Conor McGregor-Jake Paul fight becomes realistic, because Conor's sitting on the sidelines. Conor's, he's growing. He's put on 30 pounds of muscle. He's the same size as Jake Paul now. And I really think if Jake Paul beats Anderson Silva, I think Conor McGregor, if he doesn't come back and have a rematch with Floyd Mayweather, I really think he will box Jake Paul next.
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad he's taking it seriously, because I was hoping he was, like, I didn't want to tune into this and it have to be like Thunder Lips versus Rocky, and then it turns into a fight, right? I don't want to watch exhibition match that turns into a fight. I want to watch a fight that turns into a fight. So if the guy actually has some skill, I'll take him a little bit more seriously. And good. And you're right. He raises the profile of boxing, and people stay for the real champs and the real stars, because I'd love to see boxing make some sort of comeback at some point and, get to where it was when we were growing up.
For sure. And Tyson Fury just called out Anthony Joshua for a year-end, the Battle of the Big Brits, heavyweight. Even though Joshua just lost, that'd be a huge heavyweight fight. So boxing in general is making a bit of a comeback. I know the Mike Tyson thing was a one-off, and again, that's entertainment versus boxing, but that really helped raise the profile again too, to get Tyson and Jones back in there. But Anderson Silva, like I said, he's always been a showman. Jake Paul comes from the show business side, but he's trying to be an athlete. Anderson Silva was a world-class athlete. Now he's enjoying being a bit more of a showman. So it'll be an interesting clash, but I really think if Anderson wants to, I think this is the fight where Jake Paul comes away licking his wounds and realizing maybe I don't want to be a world-class mixed martial. I mean, he's talked about coming to the UFC as well, but maybe this is the fight that humbles him a little bit and makes him realize that, like they say, there's levels to this game. And again, you knocked out two wrestlers. Now you're up against a world-class striker. And Dana White said it best. This is a real fight. If he passes this test, then Dana has to seriously consider letting Conor McGregor box Jake Paul for the biggest money fight in the history of combat sports.
It'll be fun to watch. Larry, as always, love chatting with you, and we'll be getting UFHL now up and running in the next little while, because the rinks are going to be full very soon. Thank you so much, and enjoy tonight.
Thanks, Dean, and can't wait to get back to UFHL now in the insider role. A couple breaking trades in the UFHL that haven't been out there yet, the insider side. The Eliminators, Dean, it sounds like they made an announcement that they've acquired a player with SCO. It sounds like that player is going to be Jacob Verana from West Coast Express, so another big addition to the Eliminators. And the other one, Dean, Scott Lowater last night said that the Yetis have made a move. I believe the Yetis have acquired Sam Bennett from the North Stars. So the North Stars flipping Sam Bennett is a big deal. I think you're going to see that's a hockey deal. I think you're going to see 3 players going the other way, 2 young forwards and a swap of defense as well. But definitely interesting that Sam Bennett could be going to the Yetis as one of the favorites heading into this season in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League.
Great stuff, Larry. It never ends, so we'll chat soon.
Sounds good, Dean.
There's Larry Fisher. He is the head of hockey for Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports, and he oversees a lot of scouting. Like I'm telling you, our league never sleeps. It's 24 hours a day. There's always stuff going on. And that leads us to fill in the blank. So today's fantasy fill in the blank is, if you don't blank, then are you really into fantasy or just having fun? So fill in the blank there. If you don't blank, then are you really into fantasy or are you just having fun? By the way, Mooch has chimed in. Mooch has entered the building. He has chimed in on our... he chimed in that Aaron Judge hit number 55 today. Where is Beavis? LOL. Yeah, we were mentioning that earlier. The Yankees, and I haven't had a chance to check back on the scoreboard. Yankees were losing, and then they had tied it up. The Dodgers are down 2-0. No, they're not. Justin Turner just hit a home run, a 3-run home run, and the Dodgers are now up. Yankees, Twins tied at 9, mid-9th. So, is Judge going to come up with some late game heroics? We'll see. Yankees are at home, so they certainly have the last at bat. So we'll tell you, we'll keep our eye on that, see if Aaron Judge helps out anybody else in fantasy. But if you don't blank, then are you really in a fantasy or are you just having fun? So if you don't make at least 5 off-season trades, are you really into fantasy or are you just having fun? If you don't have an Excel spreadsheet with all of your players and your prospects and your draft picks, do you really even fantasy? If your chat group doesn't go 24 hours a day, do you really even fantasy or are you just having fun? All of our leagues are just nonstop. That's what makes it so great, is there's always somebody to chat with, make a trade with. And there's crazy amount of trades going on in that league. I mean, fantasy is not the same after you play in a full 32/30, whatever the real league you're basing it on has, till you play in one of those full leagues. And you're doing stuff every day that a real GM or coach does. You're just having fun. Arnie says, Larry dropping news bombs. Breaking news from the UFHL Insider for sure. All right, one more fill in the blank. The fantasy football MVP this year will be, let us know. Who do you think the fantasy football MVP will be this season? You can hit us up in our message board on Twitch. Thank you to everybody for dropping in and chiming in today. You can also get on Twitter at Duck Millard. That's Duck, Millard, or at UFS Network. Lots of fun stuff to chat about on Twitter. The fantasy football MVP this year will be fill in the blank. All right, we'll get back to that in a second. Oh, 7C's saying Justin Jefferson. Mooch chiming in right now with the fantasy football MVP. Alex, King Willie Gaming. Josh Allen, again, that playoff loss last season has him fired up to dominate. The only reason I worry about Josh Allen is the expectations are so high. Arnie says, if you don't willingly lose a couple of trades just to garner more trade chatter, then are you really fantasy or are you just having fun? I like that. Willingly lose trades just to get people talking about you. Now that is a dedicated fantasy attitude. So check those out. Keep chiming in on the message board. We will get right back to them. But let's get into our Dobber Hockey NHL team-by-team preview. We are going through these, and we are at the Chicago Blackhawks. And this is a Blackhawks roster. Larry said it earlier. There's not a lot of depth. I mean, the top 3 fantasy stars was pretty flippin' easy with this team.
What are we?
Werewolves, not swirls.
We don't swear on this show. But Patrick Kane, obviously, he'd be a top 3 on almost every team. Still. Jonathan Taves. Look at the roster. He's their next best thing right now for a guy that you think can consistently put up points. I don't know how many. Does he have a bounce back like he did during that bubble season? And Seth Jones is easily the defenseman. Philip Kurashev, if he's going to get bumped on that top line with Kane, he's the breakout player. And, the sleeper you can't even see. Let me get this ticker off. The sleeper for me is Caleb Jones. I'm going with Seth's brother. It's not a good team. it's like maybe the worst. Like Chicago in Arizona are battling for the worst teams this year. This depth chart, Athanasiou could be a nice benefactor. I'm sure he gets traded. Like, that whole top line could get traded. Domi, Tyler Johnson, Kurashev. I mean, that's a third line, fourth line on a lot of teams. And listen, I like the kid, but Jujhar Khaira can't be your third line center. Jujhar Khaira, good player, but he's had some definite injury problems.
Child, please.
So, the only way these guys are getting to the playoffs is if they get traded. Oh, Mooch says, if you don't randomly argue with Arnie on the message boards, do you really fantasy or are you just having fun? I like that. That's a good one, Mooch. I like that. And Arnie likes it too because he laughed at it. So this is a Blackhawks team that, past that first line even, in deep 30 team leagues, yeah, you're going to grab some of these guys, obviously. But 10 or 12 team leagues, you're drafting like 3 Blackhawks? Maybe they're goalie because they're going to face so many shots. Not an exciting outlook for Blackhawk fans this year at all. So there's the Dobber Hockey preview. You can find that, dobberhockey.com. Check out their fantasy preview. It is excellent. Has a lot of great information. And there's what I'm looking at for the Blackhawks. Kane, Taves, Jones. Pretty easy. Kurashev is the breakout guy. Because everybody else, I'm not sure they're capable. Athanasiou, I don't consider a breakout guy. Caleb Jones is the guy that I think could be a bit of a sleeper on a team that, you get a couple injuries, he gets bumped up into the second pairing. Not good. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough, hard season in Chicago. Maybe they have too many cats. Like, do you think it's possible that this Buffalo team just has too many cats? If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is pretty funny. So 11 years ago today, Coastal Carolina football coach David Bennett had one of the most memorable news conferences I've ever seen. It was like, I don't know if somebody spiked his drink or what the heck happened, but here it is, 1 minute of glorious bizarreness.
Trying to get our 2 boys ready to carry them to golf tournament for practice, right? 12 cats live across the road. Our door's open. Screen's broke. We need to get a new screen door, but the screen's broke, so you can come in through the screen, but you can't get back out of it. I turn and look, there's a little kitty cat in our kitchen. So I said, what are you doing in here, little kitty cat? By that time, the cat turns, tries to get back out. That screen won't go that way. Cat starts going, meow, all crazy. And I told our players, we need more dogs. Bo's barking in the back. I have to go shut Bo up. Mel's like, what's going on? I said, there's a cat in the house. Cat in the house? I said, yeah, there's a cat in the house. So I told our players, I tried to let it out the front door. Meow, meow, the cat's still going crazy in there. And I told our players, you need to be more like a dog. We don't need a bunch of cats in here. Meow, looking in the mirror. Do I look good? I got my extra bands on. I got my other shoes on. Be a dog. We don't need no meows. We don't need no cats. We need more dogs.
That's so bizarre. I still don't even know what the hell he's talking about. And just, obviously, a cat got in his house and he's got some sort of trap. Weird. Larry says, end of an era in Chicago. No way Kane and Taves are re-signing there, and can't imagine they are too excited to be reporting for training camp next weekend. They will be going through the motions, staying healthy until they get traded. It'll be interesting to see Chicago's new rookie GM try and generate a bidding war for those 2 faces of the franchise before they walk for nothing. He didn't get much for DeBrincat, Dak, or Dylan Strome, obviously. 3 big holes in that forward group already. Yeah, it's... You need to cash in for that and then get Bedard. There, I can fix it. That's great. Be a dog, Larry says. It's still one of the weirdest things ever. All right, we've got a little bit of time left on the show. Let's get to Grab and Stash. This is a number of football players that you should be eyeing up to help you this season. So, are these guys... Obviously, these guys aren't going to be the way you absolutely win, but they can help you win, or else you would have drafted them in your upcoming draft. So the first guy on this list that I'm going to talk about is Zay Jones, and he might have got drafted depending on how deep your league is, but this is a perfect example. He's not the lead guy. That's Christian Kirk in Jacksonville. But tell me who Jacksonville's number 2 receiver is. Lots of chemistry with Trevor Lawrence, apparently. The Jaguars averaged the 11th most passing attempts per game last year. They start against Washington, who gave up the 4th most passing yards per game. Now, the first game might not be the whole story, but still a guy to grab, and you might want to start him in that first game, but certainly to watch down the road. All right, another receiver. This time, the Chargers' Joshua Palmer. Looks like he could be the 3rd receiver in that amazing offense. So, not only if you have Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, it's a good backup, but also that number 3 guy is going to face really soft matchups. So I would check that out. Stash Mr. Palmer. Jahan Dotson. This guy's another guy who might not be available. He's on over 20% of the rosters already. But if he's free, you should pick him up. In week 1 of the preseason, he played 100% of the snaps that Carson Wentz was involved in and ran a route on 100% of his dropbacks. He rested with the starters in week 3. He's the number 2 guy for Washington. He was the 16th overall pick. Good production, 21 touchdowns in 21 games in his final 2 seasons. Check this guy out right now if you're out there. Eno Benjamin, running back in Arizona. I don't know who's going to be the backup for James Conner. Benjamin looks like he has the spot. And think about this. The most amount of games James Conner has ever played in a season is 15. He's been good, but he's been injury prone. So Benjamin's going to get in there if he is indeed the number 2 guy. Do a little bit of research, but not owned by a lot of rosters. Braxton Berrios. Everybody wants to know who the surprise guy is going to be. Maybe it's this guy with the Jets. It's going to be Joe Flacco throwing in the ball right off the bat. But he's increased his targets in the last couple of seasons. And maybe he gets on an early roll with Flacco. Or he's a guy that doesn't get anything, and then Zach Wilson comes back, and he becomes a guy. So, a bit of a deeper stash guy. You got to have a lot of room, I think, in that regard. Jeff Wilson Jr. is a running back in San Francisco. Kyle Shanahan turbulence. That's what people call it when it comes to San Francisco running backs. You get sucked into the vortex of Shanahan, and you have no idea what to do. Jeff Wilson is not a number 1 running back, but with the amount of injuries that are going to happen and the chaos in San Francisco, he's going to get some time. So this is a definite matchup guy that you're going to look at some point and say, okay, yeah, this is the time for we do it. And he might be available all the time. The last guy, KJ Osborne with the Vikings, new coach in Kevin O'Donnell. 3 wide receiver sets are very popular with this man when he was with the Rams. So KJ Osborne could be a guy sliding under the radar. O'Connell with the Rams had an offense that ranked 14th and 1st in 11 personnel groupings. The Vikings were not good, 32 and 28. So possibly, again, not telling you that these guys are going to be frontline starters, but guys that at some point during the season could come in and be pretty valuable for you. So grab and stash those guys. All right. Lastly, before we go, have to talk about this incredible night from Chelsea Gray. Like the social media that was going on with Chelsea Gray last night, I was hooked. I couldn't get enough of it. Chelsea Gray averaged 23.8 points on 76% true shooting in the playoffs. No professional basketball player, NBA or WNBA, has ever scored that well in any postseason. It was incredible. She was knocking stuff down. And one series wrapped up, and another has a game 5, and that has an impact on the Ultimate Fantasy Women's Basketball Association. The Aurora got a huge performance from Asia Wilson, 46 points, and their biggest night from Courtney Williams and Odyssey Sims in the second round. The Sparrows in this matchup obviously got some balanced output, though. Candace Parker, Sue Bird, Courtney Vandersloot. They remain a 515.5 to 465 lead heading into the final game Thursday. The Bull City Blazers got the biggest night of the playoffs yet, thanks to Chelsea Gray. Also, DeWanna Bonner and Brianna Stewart and Jewel Lloyd. A total of 195.5 fantasy points from those 4 alone. They now lead the Diamond Arrows, 815, 663.5. It's going to be tough for the Arrows. They need Junkwell Jones, Azura Stevens, Alyssa Thomas, Kalia Cooper, Brianna Jones to outscore the Blazers, Bronner, Gabby Williams, Julie Alamond, and Dana Evans by a whopping 151.5 points. Game 5 is Thursday, September 8th. Who will be joining in the first ever UFWBA finals? One is wrapped up and one is over. All right. Finally, we need to get to our top shelf fantasy performers. Actually, you know what? I don't think I have that graphic. I'll just tell you, Max Muncy had a massive night. Max Muncy for the Dodgers crushed a couple of home runs last night. It was very, very impressive. Puts up 19 points for the Dodgers in Major League Baseball, and Circus Sports Trout in UFLB. Muncy had a couple of home runs. He's starting to heat up. Same with Justin Turner. They're getting better. So if you're looking at guys in the UFLB, they're going to help you in the playoffs. These are the guys. Muncy, Turner, obviously the familiar faces. Randall Grichuk had 17 points for the Black Bears. He also had 2 home runs. And on the pitching side, Logan Gilbert of Seattle and Central came in at 18.5 points. Quality start win, 9 Ks. Aaron Nola of the Defenders and the Phillies had 16.5. He had 10 strikeouts. Framber Valdez had 11 strikeouts last night as well. What does Bo Bichette do for an encore tonight? And for the rest of the way, we'll have to tune in to find out in our games to watch. Jays Baltimore should be a lot of fun. I'll definitely be checking out this Dodgers Kershaw on the mound. How can you not want to watch Clayton Kershaw? He's a legend. Anyway, tomorrow, Mike McKenna is going to join us. Also, Andy McNamara. Mike McKenna, Daily Face-Off. Andy McNamara, UFFS, head of football. And on Friday, it looks like we'll have Mike Wilner, former Blue Jays voice. It's going to be a lot of fun. Great rest of the week set up. Thank you so much to Larry Fisher from UFF Sports for joining us, and Matt Bove out of Buffalo to tee up the Buffalo Bills. Have yourself a wonderful Wednesday evening. And make sure it's safe. I want everybody to be able to return to this show tomorrow. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care and have a great evening. Goodbye for now on UFSD.
Thanks now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.